You might be familiar with Mark 4. It highlights the story of this mega storm that Jesus basically makes disappear. Over time, this passage has sort of evolved into a whimsical story where Jesus just wakes up and waves his magic wand and makes the scary storm go away. But I guess now for me, it just leaves me wanting more. I mean, imagine what it would have been like to have actually been there and seen it all happen. Imagine Jesus waking up to a bunch of grown men just freaking out. Fishermen who had no doubt seen hundreds of storms in their lifetime, panicking like this could be the storm that finally does them in. And so there's Jesus, half asleep, trying to calm everyone down when in the middle of all this craziness, he decides to confront the storm with just a few simple words. And he says to the storm, "Quiet down, be still," and that's it. And then he just turns to his disciples and says, "Have you no faith?" Having just witnessed something that had never been seen before, the disciples sort of look around at each other in total shock and collectively gasp, "Who is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." You see, they needed that moment. They needed to see Jesus' authority on display. It was this sort of authority that would go on to be described by numerous people as authority that separated Jesus entirely from teachers of the law, scribes, Pharisees, and Sadducees, everyone. And so, frustrated and jealous, these religious leaders would constantly ask Jesus on what authority he was able to do all these things. His authority to heal the lame and drive out demons, forgive sins, calm storms, and even give his own life on his terms and then take it back 3 days later. The reason this amazed and yet infuriated so many people was because this kind of authority had never been seen before, and it could have only come from one place: God. When Jesus said, "Be still," he wasn't just talking to a storm. He was commanding the entire atmosphere to change. Solar heating, warm, humid air rising, clouds forming and saturating, temperatures changing, droplets splitting, electricity discharging, and air expanding, and rain falling. The whole system stopped at his command. Jesus' disciples had seen real control, real authority, and all they could do was stand there in total amazement. So on one end of the spectrum you have ultimate authority, and then on the other end you have the illusion of control. I had a friend who recently drove 15 hours through this huge storm off the Gulf of Mexico. He literally described to me as the worst rainstorm he had ever driven through in his entire life. 15 hours of no visibility, 30-mile-per-hour winds, and driver fatigue through Texas, Louisiana, and Florida. Between the hopelessness of no wind in sight and cheating death pretty much every other second, the storm finally beats him into submission, and he just kind of pulls over at some random hotel and stays the night and tries to wait out the storm. But during the storm, it had gotten so bad that he actually looked at his wife and said, "You'd think the clouds would have run out of rain by now. Wouldn't it be great if Jesus were here to calm the storm?" Every day we base our lives around things we simply cannot control, and yet we're frustrated when the illusion is revealed. When cars break down, or traffic backs up, or computers shut down, we boil with frustration because we're given glimpses of reality that are hard to swallow. It seems like we really never have quite the control we crave. I think we all need one of those moments like the disciples had. One of those moments where we finally realize how hopelessly out of control life can be and how wonderfully powerful Jesus is. A moment where we accept the reality of certain situations and our inability to change the outcome. A moment where we humble ourselves and submit to God's will in faith. Without this kind of moment, we will undoubtedly hold on to this illusion of control in a futile attempt at meaningful life. But the truth is that we are no more in control of our life than we are of our death. And the reality of that truth was obvious all along. We absolutely must worship Jesus with a healthy dose of fear, respect, and amazement, because He alone has all authority in heaven and on earth given to Him. When the storm had nearly overcome Jesus and His disciples, when all seemed lost with no hope in sight, He simply stood up, stared out into the vast, treacherous seas and said, "Be still." At absolutely no point in this entire story was Jesus ever at the mercy of the sea. If anything, the sea was at His mercy, and so are we.